I'm Mario, and I'm doing a reading for the Boston College Volunteer Reading Program. We're doing some readings online because the schools are closed because of the pandemic. And today I have a story for you called The Kweeks of Kookatumdee by Bill Peet. Far off somewhere in the let's start over, shall we? Far off somewhere in the Tumbazaru Sea, on the jungle island of Kookatumdee, there once lived a flock of strange bird-like things, called Kweeks, with huge beaks and undersized wings. With no wild beasts living there to endanger the Kweeks, their only problem was eating, just filling their beaks. The Kweeks couldn't fly, so they couldn't go anywhere. Their only food was the tropical fruit growing there, the purple pumpkin-sized fruit called a plopalop that grew in one towering ploppa tree top. And soon since the Kweeks were entirely too clumsy to climb, getting something to eat was a matter of time. They often spent hours just waiting around for the fruit to ripen and fall to the ground. When the ploplops ripened and did finally fall, it was every bird for himself in a wild free-for-all. Queek against queek, with not a one playing fair, and everyone out to get more than his share. The rougher and tougher and quicker the queek, the more plopalops he could snatch in his beak. At night time, the Kweeks were all huddled together in a cavern for shelter from the foggy, damp weather. As they slept, the Kweeks dreamed the same dream every night, that they had sprouted wings and were on a long flight to a beautiful island with plenty of space and ploppa trees growing all over the place. As they awoke from the dream, they were irked as could be when they remembered they had only one ploppa tree. It's kind of bright, sorry. A Kweek named Quentin was so worried one morning, he made a short speech which was more of a warning. "I'm sorry if I sound awfully preachy," he said, "but if we go on being greedy, there's trouble ahead. When it comes to eating, we must try to be fair and be sure that no one gets more than his share." "Terrific, just dandy," the Kweeks all agreed. "From now on, we'll be fair. Yes, yes, indeed." They tried to think of a plan that was just about right, so that each Kweek got a plop without having to fight. But some days the ploplops that dropped from the tree might be 100 or just 2 or 3. It was impossible to divide an uncertain amount, especially since the Kweeks never learned how to count. How many for each remained a big question. Not even Quentin had a suggestion. The next morning the Kweeks were brawling once more in a battle of beaks the same as before, and as Quentin predicted, there was trouble ahead, and the big troublemaker was a Kweek known as Jed. Every time he outfought and outate every one, and in just a few months he weighed almost a ton. Jed was selfish and greedy, and not only that, the big oversized brute was as quick as a cat. When a plop dropped, he was ready to pounce and snap it up in his beak on the very first bounce. Unless a plop came bouncing their way, all the rest of the Kweeks went hungry all day. Their bellies had shrunk with so little to eat The Kweeks weren't much more than big beaks and big feet. We're done for it, said Quentin one afternoon, unless we do something drastic real soon. We can sneak up on Jed before he suspects and clobber the brute with a few thousand pecks. A dandy idea, exclaimed the Kweeks all at once. We'll teach Jed not to bully us poor little runts. At twilight, when fog drifted in from the sea, and Jed was napping under the tall ploppa tree, the whole flock of Kweeks, crouching low to the ground, crept up to big Jed without making a sound. Now remember, warned Quentin, there's no turning back. Let's demolish the brute with an all-out attack. Quentin led the attack, catching Jed by surprise, with a ferocious peck between his squinty, mean eyes. But one peck was all, alas and alack. His friends were too scared to join in the attack. All at once Quentin found himself beak to beak with a fighting, mad, furious, gigantic Kweek. You little creep, squawked Jed. You little upstart. Just for that silly trick, I'm going to peck you apart. Then before he could snatch the small Kweek in his beak, Quentin was gone. He took off like a streak. The chase was now on, with Jed in red-hot pursuit and Quentin zigzagging to escape the big brute. But the island was such a very small place, there wasn't much room for a very long chase. Jed was out to get even no matter what, and he finally chased Quentin to a very tight spot. At the edge of a bluff, with nowhere to go, unless he jumped into the rough sea down below. But if he jumped in the sea, he'd be a goner for sure, and a fierce peck on his head was too much to endure. There was just one thing left for poor Quentin to do. In desperation, the little Kweek finally flew. Frantically flapping his wings, he sailed over the head of the flabbergasted, befuddled, dumbfounded Jed. Then out over the island Quentin went gliding to surprise his Kweek friends, who were all still in hiding. Come on out, Quentin shouted. Look up here in the sky. Look at me. I can fly. It's as easy as pie. Now come on. Everyone, flap your wings and just try it. We're all light as a feather from our starvation diet. And with squeals of delight, the Kweeks took off together, as easy as pie and as light as a feather. Then after saying goodbye to Kookatumdee, the Kweeks flew on across the Tumbazuro Sea. And they happened onto an island, as it turned out, which resembled the place they had all dreamed about, with dozens of tall ploppa trees growing there, and plop-lops for all, with plenty to spare. They didn't dare overeat, for fear they'd get fat. The happy Kweeks enjoyed flying too much for that. Hope you enjoyed the story.